What's going on, everyone? My name is Rosendo. Welcome back to my channel, and we are back with another video, and it is 2026. Happy New Year to everyone. A year I am very excited for. Thank you for tuning in to the first video of the year, and I am very excited for this one. It's a video that I've been looking forward to for a while, that I think it's going to be something you can look forward to every year, that I think we're going to have a lot of fun with, because that is right. We are back with another tier list. I've mentioned before that I love tier lists. I think they're really fun. I think they're a really good way to kind of get a simple point across. And if you saw last year's video, around this time of year, I ranked my discography in a tier list, and I would like to do the same thing with 2025, updating my 2025 discography to put in the tier list. I'm going to include the same tracks we had in the past, so you guys can see how they compare. We might even update a few ratings from last year in case my opinions or tastes on these tracks have changed, which is exactly what we're going to do. So again, back with a tier list, back with rating my discography, a video that I think we're going to be doing every year. We're just going to be rating this year's discography, as well as I mentioned, updating anything, but most things will stay the same. But again, thank you for tuning into this year's video. I mentioned in the community post and then last video, I have a lot of things that I want to work on, a lot of track reviews I want to make. I want to see if I can, get a way to maybe upload 2 a week. That's kind of asking for a lot. Don't be surprised if it doesn't happen, but hopefully it is something that I can make work. Still more tracks on the way. My next track is already approved. You can look for that at the end of this month, January. But today is the time for tier lists. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe for more. But without further ado, let's hop into Tier Maker. All right, we are back in Tier Maker, taking a look at last year's tier lists, getting ready to add some new tracks into there with my 2025 discography. Now, 2 things I want to do before we start. Number 1, I want to talk a little bit about my 2025 discography. I want to try to keep this short, I promise. But it's something I mentioned a little bit in my Atomos breakdown that it doesn't really deserve to be a part of that video. It deserves to be a part of this video, which is, I just want to mention real quick, because I'll be repeating myself if you already saw that video, that I'm not really too satisfied with my discography. If you want the full reasons why, you can check out that video, but a lot of these tracks are a little bit old. A lot of these tracks are tracks that I kind of started a while ago. Not a lot of them actually. 1 or 2, like 3 of them were tracks from last year. Well, 3 of them were tracks not from this year. And I didn't really feel like I was kind of my full creative self. I wasn't really feeling like myself as a producer this year, especially after the whole Expression EP, when I was like, okay, you know what? I got that out of the way. Let's take a break from that. I didn't really kind of develop that artistic expressive sound that I really like all that much this year. But I do think I picked things up near the end. If you want the full breakdown, definitely check out the Atomos breakdown. I'm sure I timestamped it in the description there. But that's kind of the reason why I didn't really feel all that kind of proud of my discography this year. A lot of them are old tracks. A lot of them were already finished. They weren't all that creative or expressive or artistic until the end, which I do think City of Rain kind of really saved my discography this year. But I just wanted to mention that. Again, for more info, you can watch the Atomos track breakdown, because we are talking about we are rating these today, which brings us to the second thing I want to do, which is let's talk about my discography as a whole, and let's see if any of these we want to move around. Because although it might make sense to do that at the end of the video, actually it doesn't. It makes sense to do that at the beginning of the video, because if there are any tracks I'm comparing this to, I want these ratings to be updated. So let's update my rating on my discography of my 2024 and 2025 discography, seeing which ones I would change. Now, these are already things I think about when I listen to my tracks again. I would think, hey, you know what, that one maybe belongs a little bit higher, maybe that one belongs a little bit lower. I actually don't think I'm raising any of these. I think I'm just going to be demoting some. Let me think about that for a second. Yeah, I don't think I'm raising any. I think I'm just demoting them now that kind of the high of the track ran away. I got to listen to it a little bit longer, and I got to kind of understand where they really place in things. Now, I will mention that I said last video, and this applies to this video as well, that they're in no particular order in the tier list. You could kind of swap them around beginning to end. I do like Empty and Alone a little bit more than Journey Beyond now, so I just want to clarify that. I'm definitely going to put this one at top. It might be kind of my top track I've made, but let's actually arrange these, because there's a few things. So let's start from the top down. Empty and Alone, we're good. Journey Beyond, we're good. Release, I think we're good. Now I'm going to do something that's going to kind of justify why Release, I think, stays in the S. I could move it down to A. I really could, just because I think Release isn't as artistic as things like as Empty and Alone and Journey Beyond. And if we're having an S tier, I've mentioned before, if we're having an S tier, I want to save it for kind of the best of the best. And Release is very good, but it's not really artistic in the same way that these 2 tracks are. And I'm going to leave it in here for two reasons. Number one, as I mentioned last video, I'm not going to bother with kind of the S plus and S minus because it's just, there's too many, then you would have to take too many nuances into consideration. I want to see if I can leave this at just S, A, B, C, D. I don't really want to start jumping in kind of in the middle and start dividing things in half because you just start to be a little bit too nuanced when I like tier lists because they're easily kind of applicable. You can kind of look at them and just place things in tier lists without having to be too nuanced. So release, if I want it to be harsh, I could move it down to A, but I'm going to leave it in S because there's not really an S minus tier that I could put this in. Now, if you're confused, let me keep going. Intro and Twilight. I have no clue why I put intro and A+. I mean, I know why I did, and if I'm being biased, I could maybe do this, but intro really does belong in A. The other thing about some of these tracks is now that I've had time to kind of have them on my playlist, some of these tracks I just haven't really listened to since I uploaded. That applies a lot more to some of these down here, actually. Some of these I've listened to. It's hard with the Expression EP, because some of them, they only really make sense in the context of the EP, and outside of that, they're just not as good. So it's hard to kind of rate these, but it is true that there are some tracks that I listen to outside of the EP, and some of them that outside of the EP I just don't listen to. But even inside the EP, intro, I don't know why I put an A+. I know why, but it really is an A track. Let's put intro down to A. And now, which brings us to Twilight. Now, Twilight is an interesting one because if you saw the last tier list, you know I mentioned that I was torn in Twilight. I wasn't sure where it was going to fall. I needed to give it a little bit more time. I needed to kind of see where I really rate it. And Twilight, I was wrong. There is one track I'm upgrading. Twilight, I'm putting an S. Twilight actually became one of my favorite tracks I've made, just period. It's a track I really like. It's a track that I listen to all the time, especially in the summer. And interestingly enough, when it came to my 2025 Spotify Wrapped, I had a few kind of super saw heavy 128, 130 BPM kick, sidechain, super saw tracks in there. I'm thinking of Rebound by Artie and Matzo and Another Youth, Steve Bryan mix, I want to say it was, that I just really like. And I've always been drawn towards that 128, 130 super saw kick driven drops. And interestingly enough, Twilight also falls into that. And it also showed up in my 2025 Wrapped. So Twilight really grew on me. I really like this track. I don't think it's over compressed, which I mentioned in the breakdown. It's definitely heavily compressed, but it's fine. But I really, really subjectively like Twilight, and I am going to put it in the S. It really doesn't sound anything like any of these tracks, and although it might not be as artistic as these, that 128 kick heavy super solid sidechain drop is just a sound that I really subjectively like. It's one of my favorite sounds. I realized that a while ago, and the 2025 Spotify Wrapped reinforced that and reminded me of that, and I realized, wait a minute, I have a track like that, and it's Twilight. Progress, not really. Progress doesn't really fall in there, but Twilight does. And I do think I want to kind of give it the attention it deserves by putting it in the S tier. We're going to put it in front of Release, actually. And again, in no particular order, but if there is an order, I'm going to put them in that order. A lot of these you can swap around. The fake ID goes in the end, but this order might be all right, honestly. Maybe you could swap these two around, and these, it doesn't really matter. Now, importantly, that leaves us with an empty A+, which I am going to remove. That's why I mentioned that I kind of want to skip the half steps because, there's no really, you could include them, but if I were to do that, I would want S+, S-, S, A+, but I don't want to do all of that. I just want it to be a nice, simple, straightforward evaluation. And I'll probably mention if any of them could go up or down. For example, Release could be like an S-, A+ track, but we'll leave it in S. All right, next up in the A tier, Betrayal, I think we are going to leave. The storytelling really kind of kicks it up a notch if you saw last video. Case chords, I do think I might put down to a B if I'm being a little bit more objective. In the context of the EP, it makes sense. Standalone, it makes a little bit sense, but it makes more sense in the context of the EP. But really, it just isn't a track I've been listening to as much. And that, to some extent, I do need to take that into consideration, because if it's coming on and I'm skipping it, does it really deserve to be in an A tier? I don't know. Let's leave it for a second. Progress, Exposition. Exposition, I think, definitely is kind of like a benchmark A. I think Exposition is kind of the perfect example of what an A looks like. Let's actually put this in the front. Because Exposition is really kind of, it's artistic, it's expressive, it's not perfect, right? There's still room for it to improve, but it definitely has a lot of characteristics that you would want out of an A tier track. To some extent, Case Chords doesn't. Betrayal kind of does. It has that storytelling. I think we'll leave Betrayal. Progress, I do think has the intention to back it up, will definitely leave progress. These two are tough. I think for the same reason I put intro and A+ last tier, we'll leave it an A, because it does have a lot of intention to back it up. It serves as a very, very good intro to the EP. And even though the mixing is just so harsh that, and I don't listen to it all that much, which could drop it down. Last video I mentioned I won't take the mixing into consideration that much, but I will take it into consideration, which just leaves K chords, which, you know what, why don't I be a little bit more harsher on myself? Let's drop K's chords to B. And then here you could really mix it around. I like K's chords more than I like call. I think call's mixed and kind of a little bit more polished better, but this is fine. And these will probably all stay in the B tier, right? There aren't really many tracks that I would put in C because I wouldn't really make a track that I would put in C. Hold that thought. You never know what's going to happen to any of these. All right, and there's your updated tier list from 2025 and 2024, including Exposition, Fake ID, and Low. So there is my updated tier list rankings of my discography currently, which brings us to the more fun part. But first of all, let me know if you agree or disagree with any of these right now. I'm sure I'll ask the same question in the end. But here we go. These are our benchmarks. These are our current ratings. Let's see where we put my 2025 discography starting now. All right, Understanding, my first track of the year. Understanding was made a lot in 2024 and was pretty much finished in 2025, and it was kind of my trance debut. The thing about Understanding is this is actually a perfect example, and there's one more track in here, but this is a perfect example of a track that I made, and I honestly think I only listened to it once after I made it. It came out. Maybe I listened to it, a few times a few weeks after it came out. But after that, I think I may have only listened to it once. Understanding is a tough one. It's a track that in the breakdown, I tried to be generous with, and I really do try to be generous with my tracks when I break them down because I like to see the best of them. I like to kind of show you the decisions I make because there's so many things I could say that are wrong about them that I could be doing better. But it's about intention, it's about expression and storytelling. But again, I really haven't listened to this track all that much, and I think there's a very big reason why. And I think it's going to be a big reason why, which this might serve as a shock to many of you, even to myself. I think I'm putting this in the C tier. My first C tier track. I knew this was going to happen, but it hurts to actually say it out loud that I made a track I would consider C tier. Let me explain why. Now, I know I said a few minutes ago that I wouldn't make a track that I would put in C tier because why would I make a C tier track? But here's the thing about Understanding. And spoiler alert, I'll just mention it right now because or else I would end up repeating myself. The same thing is gonna apply to another track in here. Here's the thing about Understanding. The best way to describe Understanding is that in the track, in my eyes, there's a big gap between what I wanted the track to sound like and what it could have sounded like to what it actually sounded like. I think I've seen some posts where people describe it as the taste versus skill gap. I always hated that term. I think it's a very poor term. It's more of a vision versus skill gap in my eyes because taste kind of implies what you like and what you dislike and what you think is good. But the thing I've always struggled with, and I struggled with actually a lot of it in pretty much all of these tracks that I just didn't know how to mix all that well, is more of a vision to skill gap, or almost the difference between the vision and the execution. Where in Understanding, I like it has just such a nice vision, and I know what I wanted it to sound like, and I know what I wanted to do with the track, but I don't think I executed all that well because just my skills weren't good enough to execute it all that well. So while the idea of Understanding and the vision of Understanding would certainly not be a C tier track, it would definitely be somewhere over here. How I actually executed it, I think I think is placed in the C tier, which again hurts to say out loud. Again, just a big gap between vision and execution. I talked about in the breakdown why I like it, what it does well. I listened to it again a few weeks ago actually, and I was like, hey, this track isn't that bad. But I knew it was just momentarily, and I listened to it again today, and I was like, it feels more like a trance puzzle piece rather than a full complete track. Although it has the elements I wanted to include, and it has those elements I like, and it has that intention going for it. It's still missing a little bit on the execution. And for that reason, I think I'm going to put it in the C tier. I really don't listen to it all that much. I hardly listened to it after it came out. And it's more of a puzzle piece track versus a full complete track with a lot of elements. Even just listening to it, it's hard that the 128 on it kind of kicks it down a notch because I wrote the melody in 128 and I wrote those super sauce and the chords specifically in 128. And if you try to speed it up to like 130, it just doesn't sound as good. It doesn't sound as big. But the fact that I kept it at 128 kind of brought the whole track down. And again, if you saw the breakdown, I mentioned how I almost scrapped this track because there were things about it I didn't like. So it makes sense that it's in this tier. But again, the biggest reason why I'm putting it in C, although as much as it hurts me, is just too much of a gap between the vision and the execution. So again, here we go, my first C tier track, Understanding. Again, another big reason why I was a little bit disappointed with my discography this year, but we'll move on because next up we have Slow VIP, probably the most fun track I made to this date, which I mentioned in the breakdown. Slow VIP is definitely a track I had a lot of fun with, and it's also a fun track, and it's a track that I listen to on my own as well, and it's a track that I go to sometimes. Definitely more of like a spring track, definitely not a winter track, definitely not a summer track. It's a nice kind of spring track when you want a little bit of that bass, a little bit of groove. But I think it just goes straight into B tier. In no way is this an A tier track. I mean, it could be. It's creatively, it might be an A tier track. Mixing wise, it might be, not really. But creatively, I could see this being an A tier track. But the fact that it's a VIP, the fact that it's not too artistic, although I think it has some nice kind of bits of fun or artistry. Like, you know, the funky areas and, you know, you do some nice things with the last drop. It's a reimagination. I do think it kind of kicks it up a notch, but I don't think it kicks it into A tier. I mean, it doesn't really compare to the artistry of something like Exposition. It might even compare to something like Progress, where Progress also was a little bit, it's not as musically artistic, but it's intentionally artistic. You could compare it to, but it's like a bass heavy track at the end of the day. It's not really my sound. It's not a track that'd be like, hey, you know what? This track is me, where some of these might be. Although it's hard because Betrayal and Intro, I wouldn't really say are, but there's so much storytelling behind them. Although I do think, B tier is fair. I think I'll put it over Fake Idea, put it over Low, I put it over Progress. It's probably on par with Call. Again, you could probably swap these three around. These three I'll definitely put over these three, but within each group you can swap them around and you can do several things with them. It doesn't really matter. But Slow VIP, just a fun track overall. One of the most fun tracks I've made. And it's not too much my sound, but I do think it has a lot of good things going for it. Let's put it in the B tier. I think it's a good B tier track. All right, moving on with One Way or Another Rosendo Bootleg. Now I mentioned in the understanding explanation that there's one other track that falls in the same category and in a gap between execution and skill. And let's just cut to the chase. It's going to be this one. I'm going to be kinder to all my other tracks, but this is definitely one that I unfortunately am going to have to put in the C tier. Actually, it's not too unfortunate. This is a remix. Remixes aren't all meant to be taken too seriously anyway. I was kind of considering, okay, maybe do I include my remixes in my discography? Do I not? They're all unofficial. Some of them I kind of made for more fun. I included Fake ID because it was just the first track I ever released, but I thought, do I include my other ones? Should I include my remixes moving forward? Should I just pick and choose which ones I include because, you know, some of them are more intentional and some of them weren't? What do I do? But I think I just decided, let me just include all the remixes. You know, I made them at the end of the day. They're part of, you know, they came out of me, so I'm including them in the tier list, which means that I do need to include putting this track in the C tier. Again, just a big gap between the vision versus the execution. It's interesting because I listened to this track again and it just doesn't, Understanding is just done a little bit better. It's actually done quite a bit better. This track I don't think is done all that well. There were some good decisions I made in it and kind of everything I talked about in the breakdown as far as kind of following the vocals with the drums and making sure they complement one another. I think that's done really well. I mean, not like extremely well, but I think it's done pretty well and it adds some good kind of qualities and rhythm really to the track, to the remix. But other than that, it doesn't do too much well. And just, again, there's just such a big gap between having the idea of, hey, those vocals and kind of the characteristics of that track and kind of the rhythm that you could do with it. You know what, that could be a really, really good drum and bass remix. Just kind of the gap between that idea and knowing that it has potential and what actually came out is just too large to ignore. I don't really listen to it all that much. Even when you listen to it, it's in such a weird middle ground of, okay, it's not so amazing and good that you would definitely want to include it in kind of you know, a drum and bass DJ set, but it's also not too simple that it works as a remix. It's kind of in a weird middle ground of something I've described before, or something I actually don't think I've described before, but I'll mention now, is kind of the differences in songs that are meant for listening and kind of immersion and songs that you would play as a DJ. A Fake ID is a perfect example of that. It's a song that you don't really need to be immersed in, but you could play as you know, as if you were a DJ. Greenlight might be the opposite, where it's a nice remix, it's a house remix, but it's meant to be taken a little bit more seriously and a little bit slowly and be a little bit more immersive and artistic. This track is hard because I designed it kind of, and I had the idea of making it a track DJs could play, but it ended up falling into a weird middle ground of half being made for listening, half being made for DJs to play, and it just kind of got lost. And because it's lost, it doesn't really fit anywhere in the world. Add on top of that the gap between vision and execution, and I think it just falls straight into the C tier. But yeah, that's actually a nuance that I haven't talked about or really haven't mentioned. Is kind of, even in the breakdown, I mentioned that this track it's just meant to spice up the original enough, but it doesn't kind of change it enough that DJs would play it in their sets. It's not kind of that, it's not as electronic enough. I wanted to spice up the original, but I didn't push it too far in the direction where DJs would play it. It's kind of, and it's also not the best for listening, so it's kind of in a weird middle ground. For those reasons, I could put this in the C tier, but there's not really much I'm going to say about it as well, because at the end of the day, I made it for fun. But again, just that vision that I couldn't quite, with my skills, execute on too well, I think makes it go straight into the C tier. All right, so now I can be a little bit nicer for all these other tracks, because these are tracks that are a little bit more my sound. I talked about why Night didn't really resolve my discography kind of issues with this year, because Night was just such an old track. But I do think it's closer to my sound. It was such an old track, and it was basically done, that I didn't really feel like I accomplished anything. But I am happy with this track. I do like this track. I'm going to be kinder to all of the remaining tracks, starting with Night, which, if you had asked me a while ago, maybe a few weeks ago, I probably would have said B. I think today I'm putting it in A. I'm going to be a little bit kind to Night, because I actually do really like it. Now, Night is a very simple track. It's a very minimalistic track. It's a very stripped track. But two things. Number one, as far as my specific discography compares, it's not really similar to any of all the other ones. It's like a progressive house type sound. Not this progressive house, like actual progressive house. It's like a progressive house type sound. It's a slightly melodic house type sound, but it's also just I like it. It's a very nice track. It has the elements that I like, it has the feeling, it has the emotion, and it doesn't really, there's really no track out over here like this. Even though as much as I like the progressive house sound, I really don't have a progressive house track, but Night is the closest I have, so it's very, very unique. And that's one of the reasons I'm going to put it in A. A second reason I'm going to put it in A is more on the progressive house sound. Is there are really no tracks out there that sound like this. It's super, super unique. Where, when I listen to progressive house, when I listen to melodic house, I think to myself, man, I really want to make like a progressive house track. How have I not made a progressive house track? Where do I even begin if I want to make a progressive house track? Same thing like with melodic house. Although I haven't really given that a harder stab, I've kind of really considered making a progressive house track. But I think to myself, where do I even begin? And then I realized, well, I made Night, and this is basically a progressive house track, so I'm able to make progressive house. The tough part about Night is that it doesn't really sound like progressive house. It doesn't really sound like any other progressive house tracks. It also doesn't really sound like any other melodic house tracks. It's kind of a weird middle ground, but this is a track made for listening, so the fact that no other tracks sound like it, I actually think kicks it up a notch. I actually don't think it hurts it. I think it helps it, right? This is not a track that you can really find anywhere else. I mean, sure, I'm sure there's some similar tracks out there, but it's a very, very unique track. Another reason I'm putting it in A. And the third reason, I just like it. It's a good track in my opinion. 7 minutes long, that's one of those subjective reasons, but I do think it's a nice track at the end of the day. I don't dislike it. I like the sounds I made in it. Not super artistic, not super expressive, but I mean, good progression, good vocals, my favorite vocal sample to use. You had some nice effects at Night, you got the bass guitar that I played, and it works really, really well together, and I do think it's just a good track. It's unique for my discography, it's unique for the genre, and it's just a good track in general, right? That I used good elements, good sounds, it's immersive still, it gives you that feeling of, driving at night. I see no reason why not to put an A track. Unique and good, I see no reason why not to put it in A tier. Unique and good, I like Night. The reason, now that I forgot to mention, I didn't really listen to it all that much recently. This is a little bit more recency bias now. After the summer was over, I kind of stopped listening to Night because a lot of my tracks are seasonal. But for some reason, the other day it came up and I listened to it again, and I was like, hey, you know what? This is pretty good. So because the recency bias almost made me put it in B, but because I listened to, the recency bias of me not having listened to it recently almost made me put it in B, but then I listened to it again and it reminded me that I do think this is an A tier track. It's possible next year I'll change my mind, but I like it. I'm gonna put it in A. I do like it. All right, next up we have Greenlight Remix. Not really much I'm gonna say with this because I think this just goes straight in B. B tier track. Let's put this over here. So now we have this group of 4 and this group of now we have this group of 4 and this group of 3. Again, these in no particular order and these in no particular order, but I do think Greenlight goes into the B tier. Fun track, I like it. It's interesting because I mentioned in the breakdown that I was by some miracle able to make it almost a little bit more commercial, and none of these tracks are commercial in any way, and I've struggled so hard to make commercial music, and Greenlight happened to turn out that way, and I really like it. It still has good progression. Lord's vocals are amazing, but it's not really much I want to go over because it goes straight into the B tier. Definitely not a C tier track, definitely not an A tier track. It's not as expressive or artistic either, but again, just playing around with vocals that I really like. Those lowered vocals on Greenlight that I heard, and I thought this would make a great track. I really like the melody of the vocals, and turn it into something good, not something great. I mean, I might consider it great. Maybe I'll definitely consider it good. I don't know if I'd consider it great, but it's something I like. Let's see. I haven't listened to it recently, actually. So good drums, good vocals, a little bit more commercial, good movement. You play around with the vocals and you start adding some stabs, good cutoff movement. It's just a nice track. A little bit more listenable. Well, it's hard because listenable and commercial are kind of words I interchange, but so I should choose a new word. Slightly meant for listening, not too much you can include in like a DJ set at a festival, but you know, with a relaxed DJ set, it might make sense. Although the progression really carries it, and I find progression-based tracks struggle a little bit more in DJ sets sometimes, unless you're smart with it. But definitely just a straight B tier track. Not much I can say about it. It's also an unofficial remix, so it's just kind of a little bit more for fun as well. But I do like the track. Not a C tier track. Doesn't quite measure up to A tier. But a track I like that we're putting in the B tier. All right, and finishing up with my most recent tracks, moving on with Atomos, which if you saw the breakdown, there was a lot I talked about why I did not like, why I was not satisfied, I should say, with my 2025 discography, why Atomos changed that, and despite all that, still remained a slightly more impulsive and less artistic, meaningful for sure, significant for sure, not as artistic or expressive, but still a sound I really like, still a sound that really is me, that 140. I don't remember if this track is 140 or 145. I actually think it's 150. That 150 BPM melodic dubstep sound. I mean, at this point, 90 BPM future bass like this, like Empty and Alone style. 128, 130 BPM kick ride, super saw sidechain type sound. And a 140, 150 BPM melodic bass, melodic dubstep sound are kind of like my three favorite things. I have a lot of things that are in the middle. Yeah, progressive house I really like, but like in my heart, the three I mentioned kind of exist there. Atomos again just falls right in that alley. This time the 140, 150 BPM melodic dubstep sound. Again, a little bit more impulsive, a little bit more artistic, but it's the sound I like nonetheless. It's a sound that I think came out really well with kind of my changes in the reverb, my ability to make super saws a lot better, because it's the first time I tackled super saw since basically my Expression EP. I'm actually kind of understanding, but basically my Expression EP. So I tackled it 1 year later and I was able to make it a lot better. I see no reason why this shouldn't go in the A tier. I mean, I could see reasons why. Like I mentioned, a little bit more impulsive. If you saw the breakdown, it's a little bit more of a red track, and it's basically the only red thing you see in here. Right? You have this, but the artwork was red. A little bit more purple hues that I do like, so it's me. This is definitely a track that's kind of a polar opposite of basically everything I stand for, but it's still the sound. It's still the sound that came out of me. It's like my foundational self in a way, not so much the meticulous side, but just the 150 BPM melodic dubstep. Hey, throw some super saws in there and just do whatever is inside of you type sound. Makes us put Atomos in A tier for sure. It's mixed well, right? It's definitely not a B tier track. It's definitely not an S tier track, right? That's when the redness of it kind of takes it down a notch. But as what I would consider the sister track to Exposition, we have Atomos. We'll put it over here. I actually do think Betray. I'm gonna put them next to each other. But I do think I might put Betrayal above, because the storytelling Betrayal is just a little bit. But I don't really listen to Betrayal that much. I listened to Atomos a lot when it came out. It was just perfect for that fall kind of melodic BPM, melodic dubstep, melodic bass sound. You could again, but in no particular order. Actually, give me a second. Let's group these four. We'll put this over here. Let's group these three and group these three. So these three go in one of the A tier, and these three go in another. Betrayal could really go either way, but it's an A tier track that I don't listen to all that much and doesn't really work as well outside of the EP. Same thing with intro. So I'm going to put them on another group, but let's divide A into a half. You have this half and you have this half, and each half are in no particular order. But there you go. Exposition and Atomos, the sister tracks are right next to one another. Definitely, I think it's just an A tier track for sure. And finally, we have City of Rain. What I wish could say was a tough track to rate. What I wish could say goes straight into the S tier. And it doesn't really hurt all that much to put it into the A tier. I do think it's an A tier track at the end of the day. And I think it was always going to be an A tier track. Part of me wishes City of Rain was an S tier track, but it's not. It's an A tier track. I'm okay with that. I can live with that. City of Rain straight into the A tier to wrap it up. A track that I think definitely saved my discography, right? It compares a lot to kind of everything out of my Expression EP, and it's like that 90 BPM sound I was talking about. And it's definitely the track that I needed to end the year out with, to really close out with something a little bit more artistic, because you don't really have that artistic expressive sound in my 2025 discography until you got City of Rain, which we put into the A tier because City of Rain has a very, 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 not very, 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 but we're going to call it very, very. Let's call it very, not very, 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 but, or very, let's call it very, very. City of Rain has a very, very small gap between execution and skill. Between vision and execution. The vision of a track but the thing about the hard part is that there's kind of two visions here. Number one is the vision of a track called City of Rain that tries to bring you into its kind of temporary city where you're really immersed into it. There's that vision. And then there's what you can actually do with it, which I think is very close to what the actual execution was. Because you can just say, oh, I have this track of City of Rain that you're completely immersed in, but you're making a song at the end of the day, and you're trying to really kind of blend that nuance. So what it actually could come out to be, I think, is close to the execution. But I do wish that it were a little bit more like, wow, so this City of Rain, like mind-blowing. But again, very, very small gap between vision and execution, which I think brings City of Rain to A tier. In hindsight, there are a few things I would have done differently to kind of push it closer to what the ultimate vision could be. So a very small gap, which is why the main reason I don't think you could put this in the S tier. It's a lot simpler than something like Empty and Alone. It's a lot simpler than something like Journey Beyond. It doesn't quite measure to the sound of these, but as a whole, the storytelling, as a whole, the track is just really nice beginning to end, and there's just a very good movement. But individually broken down, there's just a few things that are missing that can kind of bring the track a little bit more, kind of make it a little bit more immersive almost, kind of transport you to another world a little bit better. So there's a small gap there, but now I'm just saying bad things about City of Rain. Let me talk about some of the good things about City of Rain, which is, again, as a whole, it works really well. It still takes you to kind of that universe of being, even listening to it right now, not right now, but even listening to it recently, it really still does transport you to that universe. And I do think with time, it'll kind of transport you more and more. Just like as over time, these Expression EP tracks have grown on me, because again, the passage of time allows you to kind of make more connections with them in your brain. And I do think City of Rain just needs a little bit more time. So it still does the job. It still does a really good job. Love the super sauce, mixed really well, mixed better than anything out of my Expression EP. Still good elements, good space, good effects, beginning to end, just really, really good movement. Has some nice elements. Not really too much to hate about City of Rain, just a small gap between what the ultimate vision was and what actually came out, although what actually came out I think is pretty close to what a realistic vision for the track could be, which is why it goes straight into the A tier, which, before I forget, let's put this, do we put it above Exposition? That's a tough one. You definitely put it in the group of this 4, but even then, if you have this, right, at some point, this is a tough one. At some point, you have to ungroup a night from City of Rain. Actually, do you? Maybe you don't. Let's put this in the front and then leave this group of, I think that's what you do. You put this at the very, very top of A tier, and you still group these three, and you still group these three. I think that's what you do. So we'll put City of Rain at the top of A tier, because again, just the immersion and the intention behind it, as I mentioned in the breakdown with that little symbol at the top right, top left, top right, top right. I think just kind of puts it in its own category. It's meant to be put in its own category, and it's meant to be put in the same category as everything out of my Expression EP, which is meant to be listened to intently and immersively. Attentively is the word I was looking for. Intently, attentively, and immersively, which is why you put it above all of these. Yeah, I don't think you put it S tier. It's close. I think with time, it could maybe be an S tier track, S minus if you were splitting hairs. But right now I'm putting at the top A tier, a track I like, a track that's my sound, a track that is definitely kind of meant to be immersive, that I love immersive tracks. What is it? And it's definitely a 6-minute track as well. Into the A tier, City of Rain into the A tier to wrap up this year's tier list. All right, and that brings us to the end with this new updated tier list. The first time any of my tracks have broken into the C tier. I doubt anything will break into the D tier. By the way, I should add that if you haven't watched the original breakdown, I mentioned all the nuances about my ratings, how objective I am, how subjective I am, and kind of how I'm going to go about them. I could absolutely see a subjective rating of putting one way or another into the D tier, right? Because I like it. I do some good things with it. I play the vocals and the drum and bass well. Still think it's unique, even though it's kind of splits that hair between DJs playing it and kind of not, and still not being for listening. It falls into a unique middle ground. So I think it belongs in C tier. I can see if someone being harsh and be like, nah, it's a D tier track, because taken at face value, it might come across as a D tier track. So again, subjectively, I don't think I've made anything, and I hope I never make anything that belongs into the D tier. And to someone else's subjectivity, some of these two maybe could be in the D tier. So things like that. Other than that, first time breaking C tier. Hopefully never break a D tier. Hopefully never break F tier on anyone's subjective view. But that brings us to the end. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Let me know if you agree or disagree. And as I mentioned last video, if you're a music producer, why don't you guys do the same thing? I think tier lists are a fun way for us to talk about our tracks. As for me specifically, it's also a good way to kind of dedicate just a few minutes to each track instead of the viewer having to watch a 50-minute video for me breaking down one track. It's a good way for me to kind of take a few minutes and say a few words about each track and put them in a tier list. So again, if you're a producer, why don't you do the same thing with your tracks? Place them in a tier list, talk about what you like, what you dislike, and why you think they belong in each tier. And it's definitely a fun video. Definitely look forward to it again next year. I already have my next track submitted for distribution. You can expect that. I want to say January 23rd. I'm working on my next track, which hopefully won't take me that long. It's turning out to be a really hard track to make, but you can hopefully expect that in as soon as March, as latest as April, but I'm aiming for March there. And then after that, I don't know what I'll make. I have a few track ideas. I might pick a few, but once I get my next tracks out, once we put an end to this year, we will be able to tackle a tier list for 2026 next year, maybe updating some of these, including some of them. I think my next track I'm really, really liking. I think it's an A tier track. In some ways, it's an S tier, but it's just not as... It's not expressive in the same way as some of these are. These are just a little bit more artistic. My next track, while not artistic, just really hits the emotional value of these tracks really, really well, at least to me. So definitely look forward to that. I want to say January 23rd. If not, I'll update it in text probably right here or something. But again, let me know if you agree or disagree. Let me know what you guys would change. Let me know if you have any further questions about anything I've mentioned about all of these tracks. If you have any questions, you can probably check the breakdown. I mentioned that a lot. But if you don't really want to watch a 50-minute video and kind of scrub through for any questions, drop in the comments and I'll try to answer them as best as I can about any one of these tracks, especially if it's something I mentioned in this video that I could clarify about. So drop those in the comments, because don't forget, I want this channel to be a place of discussion, so you can leave your thoughts down below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. But other than that, that is all I have for you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.